We are live. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel and to our live stream Q&A part 2, bringing you some friendly history this Saturday afternoon. To anyone who wants to ask a question, bring up a comment or a topic that you would like to discuss, I'll be happy to answer it here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, where we take history in a friendly, neighborly manner, but also in a very serious manner, and talk about it, all types of history all around the world. All locations, time periods, and eras are open. We don't know everything, but we know quite a bit, and we're more than willing to share our knowledge and expertise with you. And the only thing we would ask in return, if you feel so led, is to like and subscribe and become a friendly neighborhood historian. It's as easy as that. You can also become a friendly neighborhood historian by becoming a member here and getting early access and bonus features and extra videos that you won't be able to get elsewhere. We also have Substack and TikTok and all sorts of other great platforms where plenty of content and information is available for you regarding history and social sciences. My passion and my belief is that the more people learn about this, the better off our world will be. So a very happy Saturday to you. Hope your weekend is going well, and hope you're in the mood for some good history today. So pull up a chair, grab something warm or cold to drink, depending on where you are and what you want to do. We welcome people from all over the world here all the time, and we are really looking forward to this live stream Q&A. I can't see the chat right now, so I'll be answering questions in just a minute as I set up the background. Then I'm going to put on my usual smoking jacket, which turns friendly history into History Hefner, as people like to call me. So hopefully you all will really enjoy that. So let's see. Nice historical background. What am I going to use today as a historical background? Okay, this one looks good to me. And this is not the Great Wall of China. This is Hadrian's Wall, built in kind of a natural barrier not a natural barrier, but the Roman barrier between Britannia and Caledonia, which isn't the exact border. It's still in England. It's not the exact border between England and Scotland, but a major reason that England and Scotland are not the same entity and have various different cultures and histories is because the Romans could never conquer Caledonia the same way they had conquered Britain. They were always pushed back, Highlanders and stuff like that. So yes, welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. I'm glad that everybody loves the channel. Faraz is here. Good to see you. Harry, the moderator, is here. Yeah, I'm glad, Bubba, that you enjoyed it yesterday. It was very entertaining. Anyways, questions about history or social studies, we will be answering them, dealing with them in a friendly, neighborly context, as we always do here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. We're in our usual studio today. Hopefully everyone can hear me clearly, and yes, I will be going for the next hour or so. I'll have to charge my phone at some point, but whatever. So we'll have to move a little bit, but yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that, Harry. Let's get the disclaimers out of the way because everybody wants to talk about these things, and that's the first thing they want to bring up when they come to the channel. If you're here to talk about politics and religion, I'm more than willing to talk about these things in a historical context and from a historical perspective. I'm not going to share my opinions. I'm not going to tell you who I worship or what I worship or if I worship at all. And I'm not going to tell you how I vote. I'm going to make it very, very clear to you. My job is to tell the truth. That's what the job of a historian is, and I'm going to be as objective about everything as I possibly can be without slipping too much into my opinions, except on historical matters. If you want me to discuss a political issue or a geopolitical issue or a religious issue, I will do so from a historical context and with a historical perspective, only with a super chat. And yes, I know that's peddling for money, but I've been talking about topics that are way too far afield from history for far too long, and I've got to be more disciplined about focusing on what really matters and what this channel is all about. This isn't the Friendly Neighborhood arguing about geopolitics channel. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. So I'm not going to share, even if I do give my perspective or more detailed information about certain religious or political topics, I'm still not going to share my opinion because my job is not to share my opinion. If we ever get to 20,000 subscribers, I will do a full live stream where I reveal all sorts of information about me, including my name, my political and religious beliefs, if you want to know those. Basically an open-ended Q&A. But we got to get to 20,000 subscribers, and you can help us by liking and subscribing. The goal is to get to that 20,000 this year, as we start our third year of broadcasting. We started in February of 2024, so we're hoping for a good third year, just like the first 2 years were. Next week is our anniversary, so there's a lot of fun stuff lined up for members and non-members in this channel. Members get live bonuses and live videos and stuff like that, so I really hope you will join us for all of that exciting stuff coming up next weekend. Do you think the USA gave more, and by the way, Noise is a member, that's why he's got the emoji. Do you think the USA give any more or less financial aid to Israel than any other country historically? America supports other countries too. Again, that's a little bit too much of a geopolitical question. I will answer that with a super chat. Historically speaking, the United States has been extremely supportive of Israel. One of the reasons Israel is so key to U.S. geopolitics in the Middle East is particularly because when Israel was first founded, the United States wanted a satellite in the Middle East to not only combat against radical Islam, but also to be a bulwark against Soviet influences in that region as well, which were doing everything they could to spread communism in the Middle East as well, and were successful in areas like Afghanistan until they weren't, such as the Soviet-Afghan War of the 1980s. I like historical myths. I love Gilgamesh. Anything you'd like to mention that could be interesting about it? I think the Gilgamesh story is interesting if you compare it to the story of the flood in the Bible, Noah's Ark and all of that stuff, because you have a very similar story being told by similar civilizations. The Mesopotamians are kind of the bedrock of all ancient Near Eastern peoples, and so the Jews, the Hebrews, the Semitic peoples of the lands definitely come from there. But there isn't really a lot to, but there are some parallels between those two stories, and you see this all throughout different areas of the world. Why are there pyramids in China and pyramids in Africa and pyramids in South America? Why are ziggurats common in Mesopotamia, which is the equivalent of that? You see similar stories, traditions, and motifs spread throughout different civilizations in different periods at different times. And I think that's what makes one of the more interesting mysteries of history is how prehistoric peoples tended to kind of have these same myths and ideas and articulated them at different periods, despite being completely different, using different languages, believing different things about the world, and having different cultures than their counterparts who were articulating similar stories. So there's a little bit there. How is Dr. Pepper made? I don't know. I'm not a doctor. It's not the great. I think it's supposed to be. I think this is supposed to be Hadrian's Wall, the demarcation point between Roman Britannia and Caledonia. And yes, the Hars just put up the social medias. So please follow us on the social medias for more. Can you believe I made 3 edits in 24 hours and posted on my channel? Great job. I'm really happy. What happened to the Loch Ness Monster? Probably never did exist. There's pretty good evidence that the Daily Mail made it up or was duped. If you had time machine and you could see a historical battle with your eyes, what would be your choice? Austerlitz. I want to see how Napoleon upends it. I also want to see Agincourt. I want to see how the Welsh longbowmen helped the English in such a profound way. All of that stuff. Santa Claus or St. Nicholas was a Turkish guy who used to give golden coins to girls for dowries if they couldn't afford them. He also was known for throwing gifts down people's chimneys so as to avoid being seen for the gifts that he would give people. So St. Nicholas, so some of those legends are from Christianity, although paganic legends also have influence on the story of Santa Claus, as Odin was known for flying around the world and examining men's hearts using a sleigh with reindeer. So, I don't know what you're talking about, sixes, sevens, but it seems like you're a Gen A-er by your handle. Let me see. Other questions about history or social studies. I hope everybody's having a really good weekend, and we're really glad you're here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, spending part of it with us. The modern Santa Claus is made up, but there was a guy who used to give gifts. Yes, it's a conglomeration of an amalgamation of different views of different religious and cultural traditions, both paganic and Christian, that is modernized by Thomas Nast, the German immigrant and American political printer, who not only creates the first real image of Santa Claus in the red suit with a bag of toys, but also is the basis for the Republican and Democratic symbols. So if my moderator, Hars, could put the video link to Christmas, a story of Christmas, you will learn about that and many other Christmas traditions if you're in the mood to think forward to the next 10 months. I also have a video on St. Valentine's Day, since that's coming up. So yeah, and a very happy season of amour for so many people. What do you want to know about the 30 Years' War? The Turkish dude also used to sneak into people's snack cabinet and eat their cookies and milk. I don't know if that part is true. And yes, please go follow Harsenet's channel where he makes edits of U.S. presidents and does a really good job at it. So he's a moderator. He's very loyal here. He's a member. He pays his dues. So please show him some support. What happened in recent history that not enough people are aware of? I think that people don't pay enough attention to the Bosnian genocide, to the breaking down of the tyrants of the Balkan regions in the mid-90s, Bosnia and Herzegovina, the fall of Yugoslavia, the death of Josip Tito, the execution of Nicolae Ceausescu. You think about the fall of the Soviet Union, and you think of Eastern European countries like the Czech Republic, and you think of Poland, and of course the Soviet Union, but I don't think enough people actually pay attention to what happened in the middle of the Balkans, although there's a literal genocide that happened during that time in 1994 and 1995. Had Rome conquered the whole island, do you think Scotland would have done as well historically as England? Let's assume they wouldn't have become one nation. I don't know if they would. I think they would have remained one nation. What actually allows these different countries to become independent nations is the fact that the Romans control all of this land. The Romans could never conquer Caledonia and never even bothered to try to conquer Hibernia, Ireland. So it would have been interesting to see. I've got an entire video about Scottish history. I've got a lot of Scottish history, but of course I've also got my video on Macbeth, which you all can check out as well. What if Germany would have defeated the Soviets? That it probably would have happened had the United States not gotten involved in the war. I don't see the Soviets being able to put pressure on the Germans and push them all the way back to Berlin if the United States and the British are not putting pressure in France, first in Italy and then in France after D-Day. If they had defeated the Soviets, then it probably would have included the United States not joining the war in that scenario, and I'm sure the British also would have surrendered. So the Nazis would have won the war, and they probably would have won it a few years earlier. Please talk a little bit about British East India Company and how a private company could take over India. People like Robert Clive and other British explorers and generals were able over time to pit different Indian leaders against each other. In the wake of the decline of the once great Mughal Empire, the British were extremely good at power playing and king making in order to to gain a little bit of power and authority, and usually through the guise of trade rights and things like that, were slowly able to erode the power of certain Indian rulers while gaining more and more of a foothold. Victories in the 7 Years' War, also known in this channel as the First World War, allowed the British to gain a stronger foothold in India as time went on. Eventually, the oppression of the native Indians by the British East India Company, with the Sepoy Mutiny being a huge example of this, prompted the British government to step in and take control of the Indian subcontinent and basically divest the British East India Company of its control. So, please talk about the first civilization to popularize. I don't know. Play though, I know you're asking to be crude and disgusting, but the Mayans practiced boofing, and boofing is where you would actually during orgies and different practices, you would anally ingest wine. So you would get drunk anally using suppositories. Isn't that interesting? Can we learn the meaning of life via history? History talks a lot about the human condition, and I think the meaning of life in many ways is to figure out what is the meaning of life. I think the journey, it's not the friends we had, it's the friends we made along the way. It's the journey itself that actually teaches us. And I know that's a very existentialist view about it, but basically it is that weaving journey of life that actually shows us its meaning. As we try to figure out what the meaning of life is, that's how we live. So yeah. Paid by the, I don't know what that means by that. Okay, let's see here. I think that would happen if Stalin's Red Army got the power back, then would be a better question. You probably would have had some sort of stalemate if the Soviets actually are able to stop the Germans. It's really hard to picture the Nazis losing without the United States being involved, with no U.S. involvement. Have to respectfully disagree with your comments on the Balkans. It's been a studied flashpoint for hundreds of years, especially with the rise of Pan-Slavism in relation to modern times. True, but I don't think we pay enough attention to it, especially when we consider the dissolution of the Soviet Union. We look at the rise of the internet. We obviously look at NAFTA and trade, especially in the context of neo-protectionism under the Trump administration and stuff like that. I don't think people are actually paying enough attention, and I think history is easily forgotten. So what happened in the Balkans in the 1990s is still relevant to a lot of people, because a lot of people who are alive now were alive then. But the truth of the matter is, in 50 years, very few people will actually look at it the way it's supposed to be looked at. Hars, pick any video you want and make an edit of it, even the video from here. How did the U.S. get so popular in a very short time? Large immigration and large birth rates. It's the same for any other power. I do that now. I boofed, oh my goodness, a tampon and vodka. Well, you must have a lot of fun. Was there really an Axis power in World War II, World War III? There was no coordination between Germany and Japan. Not true. They were allies and they were working together. They weren't. Basically, the best example of this is the Germans go to war with the U.S. right after the Japanese do, as a way to back up them. And the Germans were very happy with the Japanese seizing Indochina from the French and then going after British colonies and even trying to attack Australia and India during the last World War, World War II, or World War III. Do you think half the things you know were taught could be as written by the victors? History is written by the victors, but who said that the victors are always wrong? And there's enough corroborative evidence even from the non-victors and history from the margins, which allows us to look at the perspective of people who are not considered the victors, that does seem to say to us, yes, the history is right. It's not the history, the facts that happen that we usually disagree on. It's the interpretation of those facts and what they mean that we have problems with. Yeah. So, anyways, why are you ignoring my comments? Because you're not saying anything relevant. I believe Hef said they used SUPs, but they actually used a device more like an enema. Yep, they seriously used uh, basically enemas, just injecting wine. Yeah. Did you ever study the Han Dynasty? Studied it a lot. The contemporaries of the Romans were the ones who really got the Silk Road going in order to fight against the Xiongnu horse warriors. Probably China's most formidable imperial dynasty, at least the most well-known, the most recognizable. When you think of the Chinese imperial dynasties, when you think of the importance of Confucianism, when you think of all of the civil bureaucracy, when you think of China as a land of Tai Chi and Buddhism, if you think of anything stereotypical about ancient and medieval China, it is most likely something that was created or invented by the Han Dynasty. Did U.S. almost join Germans during the Great War, World War II? They thought about doing it. There's a lot of Germans in America who actually wanted Wilson to support the Germans and not the British. Let me see. Yeah, I do that. Why U.S. had larger birth rate and larger immigration than Europe? Most of the immigration was coming from Europe, and it's now only Europe had pretty sustainable birth rates until recently. So did the U.S. Do you think the UK might one day attack U.S. to revenge the American? No, they already did it. It's called the War of 1812. Let me see. But the Japanese didn't attack the Soviets. Yeah, they didn't really find the need to. They were busy fighting against communists in China. They were busy fighting in Indochina. They were busy fighting the United States. They were kind of too preoccupied to go after the Soviets. And the Soviets weren't at war with them, really. It was only near the end of the war that the U.S. begged the Soviets to start attacking the Japanese. And one of the reasons the U.S. used the bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is so controversial, is because they wanted to show the Soviets they had a super weapon and they were not afraid to use it, and they were the powerhouse. It was a little bit of braggadocious technological power by the U.S., which was a foreshadow and prescient of the Cold War coming up. The problem was that there was too many Germans to detain during the last World War. Sure. I really want to say something to trigger Harry so I can laugh. Don't do that. I am thinking what to say. Don't do that again. So yeah, hopefully you're all enjoying the first round of history and social studies. We've got another 40 minutes to go at least. Hopefully, maybe it'll be a lot of fun and we'll keep going even past it. It's all up to me, really. But please like and subscribe if you have. Qin Shi Huang's first emperor was the most influential in China's great dynasties. I mean, he's the one who creates China's real first empire. They're the ones that build the Great Wall. This is not the Great Wall. This is Hadrian's Wall. But in England, not in China. But yeah, the Han Dynasty the Qing Dynasty lasts 15 years. The Han Dynasty lasts 400. And picks up the pieces after Qin Shi Huang's son is not able to continue the greatness and grandeur and glory of his father. Harry, the British did go on the offensive different times during the War of 1812, so you did attack us. That's true. It's an invasion. The War of 1812 is an invasion. I didn't say it was despicable. I said the British, I mean, if you want to consider the Second War, I mean, this is where people just get off into so much nonsense about a stupid little war that lasted 2 years and that the Americans lost. Just because, and then the British kind of let them off the hook. I mean, so what happened to the Nazis from the Madison Square Garden rally after the USA declares war on Germany? A lot of them either changed their minds once they learned what was actually happening, became conscientious objectors, or were suppressed. I mean, at least their ability to politically organize. Once you're at war with a political organization, even in a place like the United States, you're not going to tolerate its existence during that wartime. So there was suppression of Nazi ideology by the United States in the 1940s, and ever since then, basically. Yeah. Good question. They burned down the White House. Glad Andrew Jackson kicked your butts in Louisiana. Well, the war was already over when Jackson did that, but it does put Andrew Jackson on the political pedestal, and it does change history because Jackson probably never would have become president if that's the case, and Andrew Jackson's extremely influential. And if you don't believe me, check out my live stream lecture from last Sunday, which is the first part of Andrew Jackson, with the second part to come tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern, where I'll be discussing the life and legacy and the presidency of America's probably most controversial executive, Andrew Jackson. This isn't Hugh Hefner's coat, but it is a smoking jacket, the same type that he wore, and it turns me into History Hefner. British was the reason Indians actually learned about nationalism. British rule united them. That's true. Before then, they were extraordinarily divided. The Maratha Confederacy, the different Rajas fighting against each other. The British and the French manipulated these people to try to control the Indian subcontinent during the 18th century, which eventually led into the 7 Years' War. Henry Henley history. What's pre-war issues did the treaty change that the war didn't solve? What pre-war issues did the treaty change? Well, the British didn't need to impress and take sailors anymore or steal cargo because their war with Napoleon was over. If there's no Napoleonic wars and no ongoing fighting between Britain and France, there really is no need to seize ships, sailors, and cargo. Bess Jackson, Andrew or Michael. Oh, tough one. The treaty did nothing. It restored the status quo antebellum. It did literally nothing wrong. True. What is your opinion on British colonialism in India and genocide? The British did extract a lot of resources and oppress the Indian people. The genocide that people often refer to is the Bengal famine that was caused by diversion of resources in the middle of the war to British forces fighting against the Japanese as well as against the Germans. This divesting of resources, which the British had already done to the Irish almost a century before, caused many, many deaths by people starving. So it was an indirect famine that killed millions of people. And was at least partially man-made, and that's what people consider, why people might consider that a genocide. I'm not very comfortable just throwing the label of genocide onto everything. I don't know enough about the Bengal famine to actually say whether it's a genocide or not, but when you've got the M word, millions of people dying, that in a concentrated effort, that does kind of scream genocide to me. So that's my best answer to that. I'm good. Anyways, I'm going to take a sip of coffee. As I suspected, I was right all along, and hopefully you do the right thing and like and subscribe. Thank you for joining us. I should probably drink it a little more dignified than that. But hopefully everyone's having a good weekend, and I'm glad you're joining us. Oh, I've got to catch up to the chat. I'm behind. I thought I was here. Here I was caught up. Let me see here. I promise if I haven't answered your question, I will as soon as I can. Is it a good thing or bad thing that my political beliefs change intently? Like one day I'm far right, the next day I'm left, and the day after. Just find yourself, man. Can you tell me about the Portuguese territories in India? Macau, Goa. The Portuguese were setting up bases and trading with the Indians long before the British and the French show up. And these settlements last for quite some time until they're kind of eaten up by the Dutch, then the British and the French. And the Portuguese are the mercantile power of the 16th century, using their seafaring expertise and power to basically trade all throughout the East Indies, the South China Sea, areas like that, trading with India, Japan, China, Papua New Guinea, and areas, and of course, Indonesia, and eventually the Dutch show up in the 17th century, and during their mercantile dominance, they will trade and colonize, and then in the 18th century, it's the British and the French, and in the 19th century, it's the British. So it's one mercantile seafaring trade empire after another, starting with the Portuguese. And you could say this really starts in this area of the world with the Chinese and the treasure fleets of the 15th century, then the Portuguese inheriting it in the late 15th and early 16th century, and then the Dutch, after gaining their independence from the Spanish and the Habsburgs, doing it in the 17th century. So there's a series of territories, and they're basically swallowed up and taken over by the British and the French as the Portuguese Empire declines, the Dutch Empire stagnates, and the British and the French build large empires. The British kind of are the experts at being a smaller country with a large empire. They don't have nearly as much land as the Holy Roman Empire or Spain or France, so they don't have as many resources, but their conquest of the British Isles actually yields them more and more resources. And not only do they build very successful trade ships, they also build an extremely impressive navy that kind of puts them ahead of the Dutch and the Portuguese. The Netherlands and Portugal are really small compared to all these other countries, so their empires don't become as effective as the British Empire does. But it is part of Portugal's eastward ventures and journeys, so good question. Hello, Dominique. Great to see you. Nixon and JFK were fantastic presidents, but we see how the opposition dealt with them. I don't know about Nixon, but Kennedy was a great president and had so much potential to continue being a great president. Like, that just didn't answer the question at all. What question? What are you referring to? Yes, the United States was not severely punished by the British in the War of 1812. We've been over this too many times. That doesn't change the fact that they lost the war. So with all your knowledge about history, what's your opinion on current world events? Satanic pedos finally on display, AI, nude temple in Jerusalem trying to fulfill biblical prophecy, genocide. I mean, that's just a big, giant whopper of a question. And I'm just going to remind you that I've talked about some of these issues way too much. And I'll talk about geopolitical issues and give a perspective on them with a super chat only. So please donate to the channel, and then I will be more than willing to talk about this stuff. I'm still not going to fully give my opinion, but I'm willing to give a perspective from a historian about and relate it to history. My focus is on history today. Can you please ask Harry what he thinks of Arthur Balfour? We've talked about Arthur Balfour a lot on this channel. Is the son of Leisure's suit... I don't know what you're talking about. The Armenian genocide is a genocide and needs to be acknowledged. Very true. Yes, you're pretty too, Dylan, on the inside. And I do love this robe. It is my smoking jacket, my Hugh Hefner smoking jacket. Has Harry liked King Charles, or does he miss Queen Elizabeth? I think everybody misses Queen Elizabeth, especially the Brits. Those Democrats should have have had better water luck and Watergate, and they knew it. What? What's the difference between foundational Black Americans versus American descendant of slaves? Um, well, there are Africans who have migrated to the United States all throughout its history, particularly in the last century and a half, but there were blacks who were freed or were indentured servants who went free and were not slaves. That's what the story of 12 Years a Slave in Solomon Northrop is about. The man is a Northerner who lives pretty comfortably with other whites. And there's stories about African Americans living in the North who were freed for generations, who lived side by side with white Americans and coexisted pretty well. And are very different in the way of their development of their culture and their identity than enslaved Africans and their descendants in the American South, especially after the northern states got rid of slavery early after the United States became a country. Um, so, oh, Brad Arnold. Well, that's sad to hear. Rest in peace. Is it better to die by a nuclear bomb than to die of hunger as the genocide committed by the British in India? So again, I'm not going to accept the terms. I don't know enough about it. It is obviously more instantaneous to die through a nuclear weapon than it is to die of starvation. The British did not launch the nuclear weapon. The United States did. I don't know why they're not really comparable things. Don't vote for a side. Vote for your informed decision on what you deem the best quality. Sides don't matter. Your future does. Very, very well said. How do you evaluate Winston Churchill? Speaking of the Bengal family, I think the famine's one of Churchill's worst decisions. But I'm not of this camp of making Churchill the villain. It just seems to me like people, usually for political points on both extremes, are now trying to vilify Churchill, when most people should realize that Churchill was a great leader and did a great job and managed to stand up to the Nazis. His prescience is just brilliant. The man realized problems with the Soviet Union and the Bolsheviks in the 1910s. He also realized problems with the Nazis well before Munich, well before the invasion of Poland, and well before the Holocaust. If you want to know more about Winston Churchill and his complex legacy and his interesting personality, please watch my video on Britain's greatest and most influential prime minister, maybe the most important British person who has ever lived. In fact, you know what? I'm going to go off on a limb. Yeah, maybe other than Shakespeare, Elizabeth I, Henry VIII, but I don't know. Churchill might be the most important Brit who has ever lived. And I'm thinking of Scots and Irish when I say that too, although the Irish are their own thing. Golden Age for all of Europe happened after who were expelled? Oh, here we go. The Golden Age of Europe. What is the Golden Age of Europe? Are you talking about what I was just saying, the mercantile empires? After the Reconquista, Spain gets its wind in the 16th century. After kicking out the Muslims, they're able to build a large empire. The French rise under under the Bourbons, Louis XIII, Louis XIV, Henry IV. The British build their massive empire in the 17th and 18th centuries. Yes, there is the development of empires that come to rule the world after the permanent discovery of the New World by Columbus, and with the development of Europe after the Renaissance, the Scientific Revolution, and later the Enlightenment. Yes, things, you could say that era, but what does it have to do? But that's a correlative argument, not a causative argument, so wrong. Can white people or the world survive without stealing and plundering Africa? White people seem to survive perfectly fine before they ever had any contact with an African. And the mutual trade of the slave trade hurt Africa badly in the sense that it depopulated it, but it did not immediately mean the Europeans were going to go in there and plunder and colonize them. Yeah, in fact, Europe survived perfectly fine without that. So I like how you asked a loaded question, you're going to get a loaded answer. Historians are like lawyers trying to convince a jury with a narrative, whatever they support, with whatever flimsy the oldest it gets, the flimsiest it is. I like how you say that to a historian, and then the historian reads it out loud just to tell you you are wrong. That is not what I am doing. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. I'm just trying to share information and knowledge, because knowledge is power. Move along. I know a fair bit about the Tudors, but almost nothing about Henry VII. Can you tell me about him before and while being king? Read Lucy Whitting's book on Henry VII, on all the Tudors. It's fantastic. Finally finished it after a year of reading it, but it's big and it's intense, but it's a good book. And Henry VII is a fascinating individual. Doesn't get enough credit. Probably the most underrated monarch in all of British history. Basically wins the War of the Roses, consolidates royal power, creates the internet, basically starts England on the process of exploration, international trade, and mercantile ties to other parts of the world. I mean, the guy is extremely successful at creating a successful, powerful dynasty, which is probably the most famous in all of English history. And you don't have Henry VIII and you don't have Elizabeth I if you don't start with Henry VII and his ability to basically end this power struggle that had been going on since the end of the 14th century between the Plantagenets, the Yorks, the Lancasters, all of these different families. He basically is able to unify them, and with the great weight and pressure on holding on to a flimsy claim to the English throne, he actually does a really bang-up job of holding on to it. So Henry VII is a shrewd and calculating ruler who is a liminal figure bringing England slowly into the modern period, and the Tudors are really the coming-of-age story of England, in which England develops such a strong naval identity, a strong mercantile identity, a strong independent identity, where they're less concerned with issues on the continent and more concerned with the issues on their own island. And also, predominance over Scotland and Ireland becomes a key feature of the Tudor family. And really, Henry VII is the one who gets this started, marrying his daughter off to the King of Scotland, which will later create a connection that will lead to the House of Stuart coming to power in the 17th century. So Henry VII is a fascinating man. Any historical character that remembers as positive, but you believe him to be bad? History remembers as positive, but you believe him to be bad. Any historical character. That's an interesting one. Gandhi's probably the closest one, but I'd still like Gandhi. I think I might be your most loyal channel member, and I'm considering becoming a member. Please do, Faraz. I would really appreciate it. Hello, Elizabeth. Thank you for joining us. What I'm asking is, what problems before the War of 1812 were changed by the treaty of the war that the war itself didn't already prevent from ever happening again, not giving the issues problems anymore? That is a convoluted nothing question. And I am drinking my own blend. I'm not going to say exactly which type of coffee I drink, but it's a dark roast. You know a lot of stuff. Did you get a PhD in history or something? I have a master's and a bachelor's, no PhD yet, but I will get one. Excuse me. People really do not know the Balfour Declaration or the history of Palestine. More people should know. Yes, more people should know, and I'm happy to tell them, but it's such a loaded topic that I hardly even talk about it anymore because people are just so politicized on the issue. The Balfour Declaration takes 3 minutes to read, and 2 minutes if you have a high IQ like I do. But the Balfour Declaration basically just simply says the Jews have a right to a state in Palestine. That's all it says. It does not say that the Palestinians have no right to the land. It does not say anything about Zionist aggression. It is not a rubber stamp for Jews in Israel doing whatever they want in the region. It is simply an acknowledgement of a large presence of Jews, their historical connections to the land, and the necessity of them having a state, their own state in that land. That it's an endorsement of a Christian society in Europe, basically acknowledging its own roots and connections with Judaism and saying the Jewish people deserve their own country. That's all it says. What is your favorite Marvel movie? Guardians of the Galaxy. Love them all. How did America purchase Alaska? Was it offered to them? They actively pursued it. That's why it's called Seward's Folly and not Alexander II's Folly. The Russians were needed money for their industrialization under Alexander II. It's interesting to see it from the Russian perspective of basically them being poor and needing money. We purchased it from Russia. Yes, Seward's Folly. Can internal conflicts such as the current state of the U.S. strengthen a country over time, or is it always a bad thing? Internal conflict can strengthen a country, but external conflict is better at doing that. Israel's Olympic team was booed as they walked into the stadium. Vice President J.D. Vance was also booed. Yes, I'm aware of that. I'm not really paying any attention to the Olympics. Would you agree that modern fascism is more nihilistic than the Italians or Nazis? Yes, but I think there's a nihilism that has crept into many different ideologies and political beliefs. This is not a wig, but good guess. Not a wig. Anyways, thank you for enjoying the channel. We enjoy having you here. Will the United States stand forever or no? No civilization stands forever. Let me see here. Would you agree that the scramble for Africa was a mistake for the British to get involved in? No, I don't even think, and this is going to be a controversial take to say the least. I do hot takes on the channel from time to time, and this is definitely one of them. I don't think the scramble for Africa is a bad thing. And here's why. I don't think it was good for them to oppress and colonize and imperialize the African people. That was obviously wrong. But what is interesting is to consider what would have happened had there not been a scramble for Africa, because we can't live in this bubblegum chewing fairy cookie land world where the Europeans would have just been nice to the Africans no matter what. They were already extremely racially prejudiced. They had bought into social Darwinism and paternalism and believed the Africans were inferior because their civilization was weak and believed blacks were not equal to whites anyways. So it wasn't like imperialism, violence, and conquest was not going to happen. It was actually Bismarck's idea to have the scramble for Africa. That's why It happens in Berlin, the Berlin Conference. And the idea is that basically, instead of, in fact, one of my first full-length videos is on that. So, Hars, if you could put that in the chat, that would be great. People can learn more. But the truth of the matter is, the scramble for Africa was an extremely could have been an extremely chaotic, violent mess that could have caused a world war 30 years before the actual one, because of the aggressions of Germany, France, Spain, Italy, Portugal, and Britain. All of them were involved. The idea was actually to create some sort of balance of dividing it up fairly between the Europeans to avoid continual conflicts. So it wasn't a mistake for the British to get involved from their own geopolitical perspective. It wasn't a mistake for the scramble for Africa to happen. It's just obviously the moral weight of colonization that is a problem. However, the devastation that would have happened to not just the Europeans but the native Africans if there had been large wars breaking out in Africa during the 1870s, 80s, and 90s would have been far more devastating than the actual colonization that was approved of by Berlin, which divided up the continent based on European needs and desires. So believe it or not, as much as I dislike imperialism and colonization, and as much as I condemn it, as do many modern people, I also think that the opposite, that you can't deal in the counterfactual of what if they had just gotten along with the Africans, because that wasn't going to happen. What was practically going to happen was either you were going to have a peaceful division of that land, or you were going to have a world war, most likely. Yeah, I don't know how much writing you've done lately, but that is essentially what it comes down to. There's a lot of writing in history. That is true. And a lot of reading too. If you have IQ, if you have a high IQ like I do, okay, buddy, calm down. I mean, I'm sorry, but yeah. Was it a convoluted question? What problems did the treaty solve that the war didn't solve by removing the problem from a platform of power and influence? No, you're thinking of a wrong war. The Napoleonic War ending removed the problem, Hars, not the War of 1812. The War of 1812 did not settle any issues in and of itself. How would you rate Henry V in the Battle of Agincourt? Henry V is to English monarchs, British monarchs, what JFK is to U.S. presidents. Excellent, but could have been even something more impressive. Can you imagine Henry V living and not dying of dysentery in France in 1522? The guy captured Paris. No English king had ever done that. He's married to the daughter of the Queen of France, the King of France. He's basically the King of France. And so can you imagine the joint rule that he would have been able to set up? He would have proven himself to be an effective king and ruler. Was clearly good on the battlefield. I don't see even Charles VII overthrowing him and kicking out the English, even with Joan of Arc. I see Henry V ruling for a long time and France having far more of an English influence. And that would have changed all of world history, because it's actually the ability of the French to get rid of the English that turns the English into a mercantile power with the navy that they are known for, which leads to the colonization not just of the United States and Canada, but huge sections of the entire world. So the British probably wouldn't have been as powerful over time, but at the time they would have won the 100 Years' War probably definitively at that point. Good question. But what did the British government material... Okay, they're arguing. What video did you want me to put about Africa? It's called The Scramble for Africa or the Berlin Conference. I forget. It's an old video. It's more than a year old. Can you think of a historical event which history remembers as very important, but you think its importance is overrated? Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles does not cause the last World War. And if you believe that, you are accepting Nazi propaganda. Historians who hate Nazis, like they should because the Nazis are horrible, should not just accept Nazi propaganda about that war. And the Nazi propaganda says this war actually was caused because of Versailles being mean to the Germans. That's what the Nazis promulgated. It's not true, by the way. Africa's civilization weak, yet built the pyramid and the 3-story buildings while the Europeans were debating to shower. Yeah, yes, this is a cycle of power and influence. I love this idea that it's this implication that Europeans and Westerners don't know that that African civilizations were quite unique, advanced, powerful, and rich at one point. And we certainly don't, but I do. So you're in the wrong place to be spewing that. I know very well about the pyramids. I know very well about Khufu. I know very well about Mali, Songhai, and Ghana. I know very well about the Kingdom of Congo and all of these, and the Ashanti, and all of these incredible African powers that were pretty much considered to be co-equal with the European powers they were trading with, usually slaves, as well as the Muslim forces and sultanates, and even the Ottomans they were trading with. These were pretty impressive peoples all throughout the medieval and early modern period in African history. Very well aware of it. And yes, the Europeans were backwards at that point, were uncivilized. That's because the wheel of civilization, like the wheel of fate, turns at different times. And there's periods where China's more advanced, there's periods where Europe's more advanced, and there's periods where Africa's more advanced. It's just how history works. It costs us millions of pounds in police and administrative costs to hold on to the colonies. We have to set up convoluted indirect rule systems. I just cannot see the benefit for Britain when we already had Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, and Yemen. It built the British Empire. It gave them more taxable income. It gave them more manpower. As much as people deride the colonization, without colonization, the British and the French would not have had the forces to withstand the Nazis. Thoughts on Churchill? Great leader, flawed, very flawed. Watch my video on him. That's the other video I want. I want the video on Churchill in the chat. Based on your extensive historical knowledge, how close are we to another world war, civil war? Don't think we're close at all. Just because of how the world order over the last 80 years has fought tirelessly to make sure another world war doesn't happen. It just doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon. What did African countries do with the infrastructure left by Europeans? A lot of that broke down. When you have power struggles, civil wars, ethnic cleansing, genocides, tribal fights that were caused because the Europeans did not put proper demarcation boundaries based on tribes, but based on their own desires and political whims, you end up with huge clashes. So the infrastructure is not used, and if it's used to oppress and kill people because you have power vacuums, you have civil wars, you have all of these problems happening in places like Congo or Rwanda or Uganda. So, let me see. What factors kickstarted the civil war in Bosnia and Herzegovina? Part of it is the struggle between Muslim populations and Christian populations. You also have nationalism, neo-nationalism. You have the fall of Yugoslavia. You basically have power vacuums in that area of the world caused by the collapse of the Soviet Union and Tito's regime that basically lead to which one of these areas, how are these areas to be governed, who is going to be independent. You have had this huge issue in the Balkans for centuries of various different ethnic groups that do not like each other and want to rule themselves, yet are constantly under threat from more powerful ethnic groups. The Austrians do it with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, for instance. Tito does it in Yugoslavia, but what he does very successfully is basically hold all of these people together. When he dies and his empire collapses, his dictatorship collapses, you all of a sudden have a glut, a power vacuum that leads to a lot of huge problems like a civil war. It's not that different from what I was just describing in Africa. Is there proof of the flood from the Bible actually happening? There's legends of the flood happening all over the world. I wouldn't say there's actually proof, although I have heard recently that people have actually found Mount Ararat, where supposedly Noah's Ark was laid to rest, although the Ark itself has not been found. Which is the best type of government? Democracy, aristocracy? I'm not going to say which one is the best. They all have different reasons. Respect to you and to your house. But we had to spend all of our tax money we ever got on administration, colonial, police, and military garrisons. Yeah, you had 25% of the world. The reason the British Empire is so hallowed, and the reason you're such a sycophant for it, is partially because of that scramble for Africa. You can't have Britain be the dominant power empire with 25% of the world's population under its helm in 1920 unless you have the African areas that you colonized during this, maybe before and after the scramble for Africa. My favorite Marvel character is Human Torch. Interesting. So send me a 20 and I'll do it. Okay. Wrong order, Josh. I would totally smoke DMT with this guy. Sure. Let's have fun. How you responded to my question destroys your credibility so badly. Okay. Here's how we destroy your credibility. You know what? Here's how we destroy your credibility. Let me see here. Let me see. No, I'll let you live for now. But basically, it's not destroying my credibility to disagree with you. I know you think that if anyone disagrees with you, it destroys your credibility, but it's not your History Channel, it's mine. My credibility is up for everybody else to judge, not just you, just because you don't agree with me. Is there any common pattern to why this happens? Sometimes China is advanced, sometimes Europe is advanced. It's all about tech opportunities, great rulers, powerful royal families, civilizational growth and changes. Yeah. Do you love freedom? Who doesn't love freedom? Freedom is a more modern concept than you think, though. Around 1848, should the U.S. have annexed more of Mexico? And if so, what additional areas? Should the USA have given less money to Mexico? The United States paid for the land that it conquered. They wanted to annex more. I made a video about how much James Polk actually wanted to annex. I need to move and charge my phone. But yeah, basically, I don't know if it should have, but you would have had a difference in the way the border issue works if U.S. had annexed all of Mexico because it conquered all of Mexico. You would have now had border issues with Guatemala, Costa Rica, and El Salvador, which are a lot smaller. I'll be right back. Please like and subscribe for all the friendly neighborhood history content you can enjoy. And yep, I will be moving my phone. Okay, we are back. Let's see here. Okay, so where was I? Okay, let me see. We've had a lot of pointless land in that. 25% Sudan, for example, we got a barren patch of desert with nothing in it we don't need. You need the population, you need the glory. Part of this was about glory. It wasn't just about, part of colonization is glory. So the British Empire is obsessed with its own glory. So maybe you guys shouldn't have been so greedy. You've had a year without a summer, but has there been a year without a winter? Not recently. The reason we have the year without the summer and why it gets so much important because it's in the 19th century when you have a little ice age. Technically, despite global warming, the world is going through a little ice age still. I think the nihilism is creeping in so much because people have lost faith in the idea that a government can actually be used to improve their lives. True. Let me see. Yes, the achievement of getting a quarter of the world's population is actually incredible, and 1/5 of the world's population. True. It was actually close to a quarter. So no worries, Alex. It's good to have you here. Why didn't India break apart like African nations when the British left? It did break apart. The British broke it apart before they left. But you had a independence movement. It was clearly organized, and you had the trappings of creating a strong democratic government, although it struggled mightily for decades to come. Is the dancing plague real? Probably more epilepsy than anything, but yes, there were plagues that supposedly caused people to dance. How did Tito manage to keep Yugoslavia together while preventing the Soviet Union from invading? His leadership of the partisans during the war, his opposition to the Nazis, all of this had made him a national hero, and it was basically will follow him to the death, and he was able to withstand assassination attempts from Stalin, while threatening Stalin's own life at the same time. So yeah, he was pretty impressive. And I think it inspired the people. Yeah, I don't care about the pre-war issues. There aren't any issues between Britain and the United States after the war, and Britain just kind of is done with it anyways and is tired of fighting wars for 25 years, Harry Harts. That's why you are incorrect about the War of 1812. After the Great Depression, FDR made convincingly the argument that despite everything, the government could be used to improve the lives of people. People have become more dependent about that, more interested in it, and it made a lot of sense for people at the time to get into that, and some of the things FDR did were extraordinarily helpful for a lot of people. They did not solve the Great Depression, though. We were already the world superpower. No one was going to take that away, even if we stay out of it, so we should have stayed out of it, in my opinion. No, I don't care about your opinion. I'm sorry. I love this. People, even my moderators, ask questions just so that they can give their opinion. They're not actually interested in learning. They're just interested in hearing their opinion. They're like, so what do you think about this? Well, I think this. Well, that's wrong because of this. Well, then why do you ask my opinion? You just want to hear yourself talk. Just say, this is my opinion. I would respect it so much more. Even people who disagree with me know the pre-war issues were way more important than just that. Yeah, there were a lot of pre-war issues between Britain and the United States. I'm not going to go into all of them, but basically they weren't issues after the war because a lot of the issues Britain was having was because of Napoleon. Well, I don't know. Maybe people who say I am sick of Trump, I don't like freedom. I don't know. The Victorian era is quite interesting. You are probably thinking of a romanticized version of the Victorian era. It would not be fun to live in that time frame. Fair. Let me see here. Must hate all feminists. If you want to go to heaven, you must hate all feminists. What the heck? This guy is a clown. He says he hates colonialism, but mention Israel and he cries. And if you say something he doesn't agree with, either him or his mods block you. I haven't blocked anyone. In fact, Brain, I just read what you said just to prove how ignorant you are out loud for people to hear. So thank you for proving that you are ignorant. But yeah, I do hate colonialism. Or I'm not a fan of colonialism. And I don't cry about Israel. Believe me, I don't spend time thinking about it at all. It's everybody else who's obsessed with it. Since you love history so much, why won't you mix quantum computer technology with general relativity to be able to travel to historical dates? I don't want to. What's your opinion on the United Nations and why? Let the past be the past. I think the United Nations works because the U.S. made it work. That's the big difference between it and the League of Nations. Is yesterday part of history? Contemporary, but pretty much not. Nihilism isn't a bad thing. I'm very proud to be a nihilist. Okay. Does bro know how to Trump dance? Isn't it just this? Whatever ridiculousness. Our current civilizations positions of power result of their specific myths, like the more powerful one society is compared to another one has to do with their different myths. Myths are part of cultural identity, and cultural identity builds motifs, work ethics, patriotism, social things, so they're all connected. Can you dress up as James Polk for Halloween 2026? Sure, if people want me to, I will. Excuse me. Beans on PB&J. I'm not doing that. That just sounds like the British thing to do. Trump is the king. Yeah. People who support him. Yeah. Trump. Whatever. Okay, I understand that you don't believe in white genocide, but why are you so obsessed with it? Why are you so obsessed with proving it's not real? Don't you think your obsession proves the opposite? No, I'm not obsessed with it. I don't think about white genocide at all. Let me see. Well, let's see if the Seahawks win. That'll be interesting. It'll be fun tomorrow. And I'm live streaming before that. What was the reason Britain used Australia as a penal colony? I don't really know, but it would seem like it was far enough and different enough that they could actually settle people there, and they built up Botany Bay as their first major prison colony. Yeah. Do you think cars ruin society? No. It's like saying farming ruins society. People have been making this argument all the time. What happened in Venezuela is colonialism, don't you think? No, not off the top of my head. The United States hasn't colonized Venezuela. My opinion about Israel is rooted in my great-grandmother's experience in the camp. She always told me to be vigilant to what to look out for. Look out for whatever you need to. No, do not read the message from Daniel. Okay. Do you have it? Have what? Did you know Vikings reached America before Columbus? Yes, but they were killed off, so they don't count. Realistically, using history as a reference, is the world cooked, meaning doomsday approaching? No, there's been other times where it looks a lot worse. By every single standard of living, socioeconomic factor, the world is richer, healthier, and better off than it's ever been. Just beans on toast. That sounds about right. Schedule our debate, friendly history. I mean, I can. Maybe President's Day weekend is the time to have that debate on the War of 1812. But I'll do you a favor. I'll debate you on the issue if you will just shut up about it after that. I don't care if you're right or I'm right at this point. I'm just tired of talking about it. I mean, this is literally the Trump line with Jeffrey Epstein. Are we still talking about the War of 1812? Are we still talking about Woodrow Wilson? Let it go. You're obsessed with it. I have other things to do. I've talked about this. I've done live stream lectures about both topics. I've gone into detail. I have videos on the channel about both topics, about presidents, about wars. I've discussed it. It doesn't matter to me. I don't lose sleep over it. We recently found Vikings' little settlement in Nova Scotia. No. Yes, they did. They don't count because they were destroyed. That's what I'm saying. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? I have no idea now. Me and Harris with friendly history as a moderator would be much more interesting. Oh, yeah, that'd be fun to watch the Brit and the American go at it. The Brit lefty and the American right-winger. Vikings never existed. What? Most historians point to 536 AD as the worst year. Yep, that's the bubonic plague. The fall of the Roman Empire is complete. It's a pretty nasty time to be alive, but that's a very Western perspective on it. You and Harry can have a debate. We'll put it on Discord. We'll live stream it. We'll go live together. We'll do that, and then we'll put it on YouTube, and that'll be a lot of fun for all of you guys. And I'll be the moderator, and I will be completely fair on it. Let me see. What is your favorite food? Shrimp. You have matching red bumps on about 1.5 inches from your nostril on each side. Very symmetrical. You don't usually see that. Yeah, it's called acne. Wow, what a surprise. People get acne. Yes. What are your thoughts on the second batch release of the Epstein files, if any? Give a super chat, and I'll talk about the Epstein files. That's what I say to that. But I do have thoughts about it. Don't forget to call me. How old are you? You take your bet. I'm from the U.S. I'm not going to say more than that, but you guess how old I am. I'm not going to say it. My moderators don't know how old I am, where I am in the U.S. People don't know my religious beliefs, my political beliefs, my name, where I went to school. It's all private. I keep myself very private because that's the way it should be. But if you want to find out who I am, if you want a full identity dump, then like and subscribe and tell everybody else to like and subscribe, because we're going to get to 20,000 subscribers and we're going to do that. So yeah. I don't know who Maya Sandu is. Midwest by accent. Well, take whatever bet you want. I've been told I have a foreign accent in what European country I'm from. So my name is definitely Alan. Sure. Vikings could never discover Iceland and Greenland because they could never sail that far. What? Huh? I've never seen, live aliens. I vote for Har and Harry going at it with Hef as moderator. Well, it's History Hefner because of the smoking jacket, but that's not my name. My name doesn't start with an H. And friendly history, well, history does, but friendly doesn't, so. We are almost done, 55 minutes in. Whatever questions about history or social studies do we have? Let me see. Were the Vikings killed in Greenland? No, they actually created settlements there. My name is Friendly History, or History Hefner, since I'm wearing the smoking jacket. How advanced was the Carthaginian army, and do you think the commanders were more professional? They were pretty advanced and pretty professional, and they were very disciplined, which is why they were able to win battles against far superior forces all the time, even the Romans. Yeah. Why are you so confused about the truth about Vikings? Because it's not truth. It's just conspiratorial theories. It's almost it's a commonly believed about fact. There's no conspiracy theories saying anything about Vikings. So, is it going to be a winner versus loser debate or something else? I don't know. I think everybody else should judge who the winner or loser is. You should talk about all the wars the U.S. started with false flags. There's so many. There are quite a few. Mexican Americans, a great one. This border dispute that really wasn't one. It was just an excuse to gain land from Mexico. Talk about the Greeks and Carthaginian War before Rome. Well, they fought in Sicily for quite some time. The Carthaginians owned Sicily, Corsica, and Sardinia before the Romans did. We found no evidence about Vikings, except we found Viking settlements in Nova Scotia with runes and stuff like that, so wrong. I couldn't fit my comment in. Please comment. Why didn't England reconquer the USA? They didn't want to. So yeah. Anyways. Other questions about history or social studies? Inuit ruins. So why do Inuit ruins have the same design as ruins from Norway? What's the truth about Winston Churchill? Why is everybody asking me about that today? I've already said it. Churchill was a great leader who helped Britain defeat the Nazis. That's pretty impressive. The fact that he saw the Nazi threat coming beforehand is probably his greatest accomplishment. Save US, we saved you. Saved who? I'm not a Brit, if that's what you think. Vandals were they came from, now invaded Spain, North Africa. Yeah, that's true. The Vandals took over North Africa at the end of the Roman Empire. Am I correct or no? US and UK went from enemies to rivals after War of 1812, and during the Great War, which we call World War II, they went from rivals to allies. They were already pretty much allies by the time. You have the Hay Treaty over the use of the Panama Canal. You have the spheres of influence and the open door policy in China. The British show up to Japan and are trading with them soon after Commodore Matthew Perry. The Americans and the British were already getting along pretty well before them. Do you think General Patton was assassinated? It's very possible. Let me see here. What are your thoughts? Have you ever worn a cowboy hat? Yes, I have. Can I take over the Friendly History channel? No. What are your thoughts on the whole stolen land thing? It seems many people don't realize how much people moved around all throughout history. Different people and culture have invaded and migrated around. Everybody's living on stolen land. I mean, Billie Eilish has every right to complain about the mistreatment of immigrants by ICE. I get it. I get people wanting to cause attention, but no one is illegal on stolen land. Well, that means that no one is illegal, period, because everything is stolen land. People just think about it as stolen land in the context of the American Indians losing their land to the British, the French, the Dutch, the Spanish, the Portuguese, and of course, eventually the United States. But the truth of the matter is that a lot of the land was conquered, even paid for at times. And yeah, the land was stolen. Treaties were manipulative and deceptive. Natives were treated horribly, pushed out, and oppressed. But, I mean, if your political argument is immigrants deserve to stay here and remain on this land and are not illegal because the land was stolen, then you are assuming that the land belonged to the natives, which would mean the Europeans are illegals, which means they are not illegal either, by your logic. It's a self-defeating argument. And it's just it's, for me, really just a stupid talking point. It doesn't actually carry any weight, and it doesn't help solve the issue. You can have real concerns about the way the United States has handled immigration and the way it handles those operations without making an idiotic argument. And of course, she has a prerogative for doing this. She's Irish, and of course, Irish history includes a lot of stealing of land, particularly by the British and the Scottish, or the English and the Scottish. But the Irish, but stealing land is something that people do to each other. I mean, everyone lives on stolen land. All land has been stolen. The Normans stole England from the Anglo-Saxons, who had stolen it from the Celts, who had been stolen by the Romans. There are different groups that steal different land everywhere. So you just go to the British Isles, and you're just going to find dozens of examples of stolen land. You go to the United States, you're going to find the same thing. The only reason people care about it is because of racial and issues about what are called natives, when the Native Americans were not native to this land and stole land from each other constantly. So are the natives that conquer the Sioux that push out the Crow Are they natives to that land? Are they living on stolen land? It's absurdity. I just think it's a bad argument, even if the political argument is moral. The moral and historical argument is nonsensical. Let me see. We saved you. Classic. Yeah. Are the Vandals Nordic from Sweden and Norway Germanics from Germany? Yeah, there's a mix of Nordic and Germanic peoples in that area of the world. They do not resemblance with the Inuit. I'm from Quebec. I've seen Inuit symbols multiple times. It has nothing to do with Inuits. Yeah. Either you're going to have to explain why their symbols are the same, or you're going to have to just accept that they're not Inuit symbols, which is much more likely. How old, you say, are the pyramids in Egypt? Any favorite conspiracy theory? No, not really. 4,500 years. Can you, Khufu, I go with the general theory. Can Ukraine and Russia ever go back to being neighbors? They almost never were. They were always either one or the other dominating each other. Their neighborhood days lasted for about 20 years in the 90s. There are three, and I don't think it's going to happen. Are there three common denominators whenever Harris is debating it? He calls you disingenuous or whatever. I'm tired of you two arguing. Why some black Americans think that Hannibal was black? He was North African, olive-skinned, and Phoenician. I mean, he was technically African, so if you want to say that he's African, I can understand that. That's an important factor to point out. But that doesn't mean that he's, he's sub-Saharan African. There's a huge distinction in history and culture between the Maghreb of North Africa and sub-Saharan Africa, which includes places like South Africa, Uganda, Somalia, things like that. Do you think Norway should declare independence from Sweden? They already have. They're independent countries. We defeated the wrong enemy. Yeah, Patton was obsessed with the Soviets and with invading the Soviet Union, and this was dismissed by the U.S. after the war. But the U.S. was willing to fight a series of proxy wars and technological warfare called the Cold War, so I don't think that the U.S. had a reason to actually kill Patton. That was just it would have been a cataclysmic failure for the U.S. to actually invade the Soviet Union because the Nazis hadn't succeeded, Napoleon hadn't succeeded a century and a half before. It would have made no sense for the U.S., battered and broken after the war, to go after the Soviet Union, which was so expansive and controlled all of Eastern Europe. That would have caused tens of millions and more people to die. Let me see. Stolen from who? To which tribe should... Yes, exactly. Who is and why is the argument about stolen land always natives, always the native peoples? They're not necessarily natives. They stole land from each other. They're not monolithic or unilateral. They are diverse with different backgrounds and agendas. And we never talk about the fact that Charlemagne, the French, stole land from the Germans, and so on and so forth. What about the lands the Muslims stole from the Christians? Do we add this or not? What's the deal? I'm not going to say what my ethnicity is. You can take a guess. Why did Franco's Spain not enter World War II or the side of Germany and the Axis? They did help. They sent weapons and ammunition and sometimes some military support, but they've been devastated by a civil war, and Franco really wasn't in bed with the whole Aryan race thing. Neither was Mussolini, by the way. Let me see. The Native Americans were pushed, were oppressed, were conquered, did have horrifying things happen to them in terrible numbers. It's not to dismiss what happened to them, but it's to say that this happened, why are we only focused on them is what I want to know. Why is it only about them? That's what bothers me about it. I'm from the U.S. No, Billie Eilish is she's Irish. The white European men built modern-day American civilization. True. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's bad things about that. Like, there's bad things about the fact that white people have done evil things. But every civilization, every country that's been built up has been built up, and some of the things that the people do to build that nation up are evil. And it has nothing to do with whiteness. Whiteness doesn't even exist. So people can be white, but whiteness doesn't exist. Let me see. I'm not going to talk about ICE. I'm not going to talk about the operations of the U.S. president. I'm not. I'll do a super chat if you want me to talk about the history of it. But the truth of the matter is, I'm not going to share my political perspectives on these issues. I mean, I can understand why so many people are outraged with what ICE is doing, but I'm not going to say more than that. And I don't think that making the stupid argument because you're at the Grammys and you just won an award because you're good at making music makes you an expert on history or politics. And I'm sorry, you're historically ignorant, and which means you're probably politically ignorant as well. Yes, exactly. The North Africans look very different from sub-Saharan Africans because of the Mediterranean trading. Yeah, and you also have Semitic peoples like the Phoenicians who settled Carthage. Let me see. If it was 4 years ago, I would understand, but come on, I don't know what you mean. Yes, I'm totally Jewish. I'm actually not Jewish. And the only reason I don't share my ethnicity, normally I'd say, am I? Who knows? But no, I'm not Jewish. And the reason I share that is because everybody's always like, you're a Jew, you're a Jew, you're a Jew. No, I'm not. I haven't heard you fully explain the 1812 results to your moderator. The United States lost the war, and people can't get over it. It's 213 years later, or 214 years later, and people can't get over it. Take whatever guesses you want. No Native Americans died naturally. A lot of the Native Americans did die naturally, but they did die in warfare, and they did die in massacres, and they did die in ethnic cleansing and moving and being pushed out of land. That's true. We have to acknowledge that. It's wrong not to acknowledge that. I'm not going to whitewash history. I'm not going to blackpill about history, but I'm also not going to ignore horrible things that happen in history. Any thoughts on the rise of Afrocentrism recently in this age, eventually, of readily available information? Do you mean this whole thing that we was kings, or the idea that Africa is probably the bedrock of all human civilization, in the sense that humans most likely came from Africa, but what does that have to do with anything? I don't know what you mean by the question, really. Why there's a Cold War between Morocco and Algeria? I don't know, actually. I don't know enough about that. The people who are outraged at ICE are idiots. I am an ICE supporter. Well, support whatever you want, but it's not my job to make this channel into a political thing, so stay on history for us. Spanish stole land from the South American natives, but Mexicans don't get the shame as white Americans. Well, the Mexicans get their independence, but they oppressed the natives in horrible ways in California and the Southwest. The Mexicans did horrible things to the natives in Mexico. The Mexicans were actually far nastier, by many accounts, to the Apaches and the Comanches and the Pueblo than the Americans or the Spanish were. It's not talked about enough because Mexican history isn't talked about enough. And there's a lot of wonderful and amazing things about Mexican history that I love, but we don't talk about Pancho Villa, Porfirio Diaz, the treatment of the natives by the Mexican government. The efforts of France to create an empire in Mexico. You probably don't know that's where Cinco de Mayo actually comes from, but I do, and the people who follow this channel do, because we talk about it. Because it's really stupid and ignorant of Westerners to be so focused on, really, it's just white history. It's American and British and French history and Germans and Italians sometimes, but it's not actually focused on Western even, because it ignores Latin America, it ignores Mexico. It's the focus so there is an ignorance in America, it's really bad, of non-American history. There's a little bit of knowledge about European history, but it's only in the context of the American founding, but then there's not nearly enough knowledge about Mexican history, Latin American history, which is proximal, which is in the same hemisphere as you. And then there's the whole thing about, and that's not to say anything about Asia and Africa, which you know even less about. So Americans are really responsible for their historical knowledge. I'll stop pretending to be stupid. I just subscribe because you're really chill and you're teaching me a lot of new things. Greens from Sweden. Well, thank you for joining us from Sweden. Oh, you were trolling. Well, I'm glad you're here. Spanish stole, yeah, let me see. Do you think that the origins, indigenous people of Iberian Peninsula is Celtic and Germanic and how it changed? I don't know who they are, actually. I don't know enough about that. I think they might have been Celtic, but I'm not sure. Let me see. Billie Eilish has good music. There's no doubt about it. I like her music. That doesn't mean she's right about making a claim from history. Why were there black slave owners in the 1700s? Why were there black slave owners in the 1700s and 1800s? Why are there 10 million slaves in Africa today? There are more slaves in Africa now than there were when the Americans were getting slaves from Africa. So there's people enslaving each other domestically is just part of history, unfortunately. It's important to learn about, but it's part of history. People internationally trading in slaves started before the Europeans, but people using ships and technology to connect different continents while trading in slaves, that's the European transatlantic slave. So we need to be very specific about these terms. Columbus doesn't discover America, but he creates sustained permanent contact between the Americas and Europe. And then, of course, Africa is added into that. The African international slave trade started long before the Europeans show up in Africa, but continual trade of slavery in the Western Hemisphere and connection between Europe and Africa, yeah, that's the slave trade that we know and hate. And rightfully so. It's evil. It's horrible. But there were black slave owners who were former slaves. William Allison in South Carolina or North Carolina during the Civil War. Blacks owned slaves in almost every single area where there was slavery of blacks. You would have freed blacks who would own slaves. Central, South America, North America, Jamaica, Haiti. So yeah. Genetic analysis shows that Native Americans aren't even native to the Americas. They're all Turkic Mongol people. Yes, they are. They are originally from Siberia and parts of Asia, most likely. How can we go back to building mega projects successfully within a 3-year time frame? I don't know. It just seems like everything just takes too long because of red tape, but who knows? I understand why people say the USA lost the War of 1812 from other sources, not from hearing you complain about your moderator. True, we lost the War of 1812 for many various reasons. And I'm sorry, I'm an American. I love American history, but stop with the jingoistic nonsense that America has won every war it's fought, because you got Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and the War of 1812 staring dead in your face. And if you're a Brit or if you're a European, stop pretending that the United States wasn't a crucial part of winning both world wars in the 20th century and the First World War in the 18th century, because there's an entire quadrant of the war that relies on American colonials fighting and dying with the British and their Indian allies to stop the French and their Indian allies. Should the British apologize for the Irish potato famine? Yes, they absolutely should. Countries should apologize for something that they directly caused. That doesn't mean that you do vast reparations, but people should apologize for the things they have done wrong. The potato famine is one of the worst atrocities in British history. It's weird we talk about that, but we don't talk about that nearly as much as the other problems the British Empire did. Why would Finland team up with the genocidal maniacs against the Soviets during World War II? You mean World War III? The Winter War. Stalin used the Germans, the non-aggression pact, and the Europeans being focused on Hitler to invade and attack Finland. What's an apology going to do? I mean, we should acknowledge and learn from these things, and people should be sorry for evil things that they did, and that their nation did. Is it true that only 10% of American citizens own slaves? I think it's even lower than that. Oh, my battery on my computer died, which is where my lights get their energy from. So, yeah, that's true. Let's see here. What else? Let me see. Yeah, Stalin wanted land in Finland and took the chance. I met some black Africans claiming black African migrants were the Native Americans, original Jews, and Olmec and Asmonia tribes. It seems to be on the rise. Yeah, no, just no. It's not true. Let me see here. She should be deported by ICE. What? Why? Just because you don't like her music? They don't team up. Okay, I'm going to try to catch up to the chat. What was the War of 1812? The U.S. Got tired of the British taking sailors and ships during the War of Napoleon. They had been kind of playing both sides. The French and British had been doing it for 20 years. And eventually they sided with the British, the French, well, kind of sided with the French, but went to war with Britain to stop it. The British were known for taking sailors who were born British citizens because they had owned America at one point, and saying they're actually British, so British subjects, so we can take the sailors, not just the cargo on the ship. So the Americans got tired of that and started a war over it, and the British burned their capital. But for some reason, that means the Americans won the war because the British wouldn't punish them even more severely. How the Mongols almost invaded the whole Europe and what they've done in Baghdad. Well, they were able to they were able to conquer Persia, create the Ilkhanate, and they were also able to get all the way into Europe before a Kurultai was called because Möngke Khan died. So they had to basically pull back their forces, but they could have conquered Vienna and Austria if they had kept going, which would have devastated the Habsburgs and stopped them before they really got going. Let me see. What would be World War I for you? 7 Years' War. Hars, put the video in the chat so they can watch it and learn about this First World War. You, when extreme leftist labels you as fascist, what should you do? Maybe you should embrace the term fascist, say this is not fascism, but it's called fascist, then I am one. This is what I hate. These terms don't mean anything anymore because people have devalued them by their nonsensical argument. And now we have people who are like, I will be a racist, I will be a Nazi, I will be a fascist. And those are evil things. They've been proven clearly to be wrong, clearly to be destructive, clearly to be awful. And yet people want to embrace those terminologies because people who hate those terminologies have devalued them by calling everyone a fascist or a Nazi or a racist or a white supremacist. It's balderdash for people to call anyone they disagree with that, but also it's balderdash for people to say, well, then it's acceptable to be one. No. Have a compass on this stuff. Be in the middle. No one should want to be called a Nazi. No one should want to be called a fascist. But not everyone who you disagree with is one. Jester, great to see you. Frog, great to see you. Rodolfo's here, one of my moderators. What would happen if Germany won World War II? You mean World War III? It probably would have destroyed all of Europe's Jewish population, probably made the Soviet Union dissolve or become a shell of its former self. I don't know what they had plans for the Middle East. They probably would have forced the British to pay some sort of war indemnity to them. I don't know. You probably would have had Pétain stay in power in France. So, yeah, I don't know. Fascism had success. It's Chile and Spain. I don't call Chile and Spain successful regimes. The United States bailed out Spain because Franco said he wasn't a communist, and the United States had their new boogeyman of the communists, so they basically allowed Franco to stay in power and supported him because he was anti-communist. So that allowed Franco to stay in Spain until he died in the 1970s. I don't even know that Franco's really a fascist, especially later. Franco was really good at feeling the pulse of his people and realizing, I've been a little too harsh. It's what Castro does for the communists in Cuba. Okay, it's not working right now. I have to be more pragmatic than I have been. So I have to allow some freedom of press, some freedom of speech, some economic leeway. And Franco does it in Spain over and over again in order to stay in power until he finally dies. Are you saying the current Chinese fascist regime isn't successful? China, they're not fascists. They're communists. They're successful because of their economic adventures. They're not successful if you consider them from a moral perspective. Are they able to keep control of their people? Yes. This is like saying the Soviet Union was successful. This is the Fabian George Bernard Shaw argument. Who's the most cruel king in history? King Leopold II of Belgium. What he did to the Congolese, absolutely abominable. True. Fascism, as Mussolini created, was not the same as fascism in Germany. Fascism in Germany was racial fascism. Yeah, they aren't necessarily exclusionary. There are dictatorial, authoritarian elements in both of them. They are anti-democratic, they're illiberal, all of that. Yeah, I understand that morality can be subjective, but when millions of people are dying, that's probably a bad thing. So what's the cost you're going to say? To say, well, by this standard, Stalin was successful. Stalin killed 20 million to 30 million people. Look at what you did. You built this on bones. 2 battles happened before the Plains of Abraham. One was the Battle of Saint Denis. I think the French pushed them back, which made them first calling to defeat them, but then got crushed. Interesting. Genghis Khan and Hulaku? Who's Hulaku? Killed 59 million people. Yes. Sorry, but not supporting. Okay, whatever. Successful to his aims, not successful in a prosperous nation. And their nations weren't prosperous. And Franco was able to stay in power, but Spain immediately reverted after he died. Chile, you had Pinochet's government having to be overthrown. These things do not end well. Franco is one of the very few examples where a fascist or communist dictator lives out his life peacefully and dies. What was the largest contribution to the Chinese deaths during the Very Great Leap Forward? The famine. And unless you want to talk about the Cultural Revolution, where Mao was just purging and killing people left and right. We killed millions in Iraq. Who's we? The United States? First off, that's not true. The United States did not kill millions of people in Iraq. Democide, yes, the killing of your own people. Well, it was man-made famines, privation of resources, collectivization of crops, and the unwillingness to distribute them properly that killed off millions of people. We killed civilians in World War II. We are the only country to drop atomic bombs on another country. Okay, there's 3 world wars, first of all, and yes, the U.S. is the only country that dropped atomic bombs. Do you know how many people would have died in Japan had the United States invaded the islands, or if the Soviets had invaded the islands? Imagine if Hokkaido was attacked by the Soviets, and the United States comes from Kyushu in the south. Do you know how many millions of people, Japanese, American, and Soviet, would have died? No, there wasn't 1 million people who died in Iraq. There was 1 million people who died in the war, but not from the hands of the United States. You have the Iraqis killing their own people, combined with civilian deaths in military strikes. So yes, hundreds of thousands of Iraqis died, but it wasn't the United States intentionally killing them. And some of them were killed by their own people. It's not the U.S. going in and just killing millions of people. Yeah. Hey, just saying we don't hold any high ground. Now, that's not true. The Nazis were bad. The Imperial Japanese were bad. The Soviet Union was bad. There is a little bit of a difference. Yes, the U.S. did horrible things in wars. So has every single power that's ever fought a war. Why are you fighting the war? What is the purpose of the war? Is the purpose of the war so you can round up and kill more Jews, Slavs, homosexuals, and communists? Or is the purpose of the war so that you can free those people? Is the purpose of the war to cause the suffering at Nanjing to all of Asia? Or is the purpose of the war to stop the people who caused Nanjing and the Bataan Death March? Was Pol Pot based? No. If there's ever been a democide that's really bad, it's Pol Pot's. The largest proportional genocide in history was caused by the Khmer Rouge. So it was 1 million. It happened because we invaded, so we did cause it. That's a silly argument. That's facile. Yes, the U.S. invaded, and that did, yes, the U.S. invaded. People died because of that. That's not the U.S. killing them. In fact, Saddam was more likely to kill his own people than the U.S. was. So there was already conflict in Iraq, whether the U.S. went in or not, people were going to die. There was already people suffering and dying under Saddam's regime, tens and hundreds of thousands through the 80s with his war of Iran, all the way down through the line. I'm not saying the war in Iraq is justified. I'm saying to accuse the United States of killing millions of people in Iraq to just be no different than the Nazis is absurd nonsense. It's what Christopher Hitchens would call obscene wickedness. The British said Saddam Hussein had a wood chipper he would feed people to. Yeah, it's probably not true. A lot of what they said about him wasn't true. But there was evidence of use of democide by the Hussein regime. No, the U.S. Army did not kill 1 million Iraqi civilians. 1 million Iraqis died in the war. There is a difference. There is a profound difference. So, deaths in Iraq ranges from 150K to over 1 million. How can you know when experts don't? So that's a huge range, by the way. And Jester, it's good to see. It's been a while. Let me see. Is Venezuela better off now without Maduro? I mean, I don't know. I would assume yes. The people of Venezuela voted overwhelmingly to get rid of him, and he stayed in power. Let me see. What are your credentials? I have a master's and bachelor's in history. I was talking about history and social studies. I was talking, and I was connecting it to immorality only because a prosperous regime. I mean, if you want to think of a meme, it's like the pie graph with the green, the blue, and the red, and it's police state, happiness, joy, successful population, and they're the different colors, and that's the Soviet Union. The Mongols killed more people in Iraq than the USA. That's true. That was their main fighting ground against the Mamelukes, where they were eventually defeated. Citations. Fact check me. Saying I'm pulling it out of my rear is funny when you won't fact check me. Please fact check me. Show me that I'm wrong. I'm more than willing to be wrong. But you need to be more than willing to fact check me. I'm not just going to pull up citations and go to this website right now and this and that. I'm in the middle of a live stream. The feed will stop if I go to a website, read something, and then come back to you. Fact check me, Travis. And if I'm wrong, I will admit it. The military also claimed that they killed for no good reason. Sounds about right. Jewish atheists, shut up, Jew. Most of the problems are caused by your people. Oh, there we are again with the Jew thing. I'm not Jewish. And I don't want to talk about the Israel Jew thing today. So, sorry, Martin. And by the way, if the Jews run everything and cause most of the world's problems, why couldn't the Jews stop the Holocaust, the pogroms, the Crusades, the Inquisition? If the Jews were secretly running things behind closed doors for all these centuries, why can't they stop Jewish persecution? I mean, yeah. Stop acting like we have a good reason to be attacking other countries. I was talking to the guy named Jewish Atheist, not you, man. Can't read your comments. I have no idea who you're talking to because you're not making any sense. But Jewish Atheist isn't a man, and more importantly than that, what does that have to do with anything? I thought you were calling me a Jewish Atheist. Are you an expert in meme history? Yes, I remember 9gag very well. I go back that far. The beginnings of memes, the Forever Alone guy. I remember him very well. They still keep skulls of the victims of Khmer Rouge in a glass box. They unalive people for wearing glasses. Yep, basically. It was, how do you determine kulak? Well, it's a peasant who owns a horse. The Soviet Union did it. The Chinese did it. All of it. This guy, he's definitely easy pickings. What? Yes, I'm aware that there is a person in my live who is called that Jewish Atheist, and they're agreeing with me, and so you have been arguing with me, so I figured you were talking to me. Read more before you comment, bro. So the guy who said that the U.S. killed 1 million Iraqis, which isn't true, just told me to read more. How can you be a Jewish and atheist at the same time? Jewish refers to the ethnicity. Atheist refers to the religious beliefs. You can be a Jewish person who practices Judaism. That's the religion, so on and so forth. Let me see. His name is literally Jewish Atheist. That he's in the comment. Yes, I know who you're talking about. Do you like boys? Brother. They don't run everything, but they do have powerful, wealthy people who do bad things. Do you know who else has powerful, wealthy people who do bad things? Irish people, English people, Germans, French, Egyptians, Saudi Arabians, Qataris, Russians, everybody. I think they assume you as a Jew because you are talking fast. Reminds me of Ben Shapiro. Not all Jews talk fast. Okay, I didn't call you Jewish. Have fun with that, but okay. What was your joke? Too much anti-Semitism in the comment section. You're telling me, Awidi. Where's your joke? A Persian and an Ottoman walk into a hookah bar. The Ashkenazi bartender says, "Why the same face?" That's funny. So you're going to argue that Israel doesn't influence our country at all. You're acting like Israel didn't influence the Iraq war. You're just lying now. The U.S. went to war in Iraq because of the weapons of mass destruction thing. That was the main reason. Israel is a secondary reason. Yes, Israel has an influence on U.S. policy. You know who else has an influence on U.S. foreign policy? Every single European country it's allied to. There's only one country in the Middle East that the U.S. is openly allied with, and that's Israel. So, of course, Israel has influence in the U.S. You don't think the U.S. has influence on Israel? You just believe everything, man. Yes, I believe what's true. I don't believe everything. I believe everything that's true. How many years were you were studying history? I've been studying for more than 20 years. And if you look at me and you guess my age, you can figure out that I'm at least 20, but not much more than that. I used to be anti-Semitic, but I started thinking and realized how stupid it is. It's completely stupid. Any sort of prejudice, any sort of conspiratorial prejudice where this group controls everything and they're bad is stupid. It's also totally historically inane. So, Europe definitely doesn't have influence on U.S. politics. We more or less tolerate the Europeans. The Europeans do have influence. That's why you have NATO. That's why you have the Marshall Plan. The Europeans being part of the part of America and influencing American foreign policy is huge. Most of our politicians blackmailed. Where have you been, man? USA is Israel's dog. Okay, you believe whatever you want to believe. This is a history channel. If you want to talk about the Israel thing, give me a super chat. If all the Jews are so powerful, how did anti-Jewish propaganda reach the ears of people who couldn't be reached by even public education? Thank you! Thank you, Roman. It's the biggest. The Jews control everything. Why the Holocaust then? If the Jews killed Charlie Kirk, why haven't they killed Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson? Or Candace Owens, who are all anti-Semites? They'll kill a guy who was pretty supportive of them, but they won't kill them? It's just maddeningly stupid when you break it down. Why did the Nazis hate the Jewish people during Hitler's reign? Okay, I'll answer this because this is actually a historical question, but it's from Hector, so God knows what he's going to do as a response. The Nazis hated the Jews because they believed they had an undue influence from the background in the shadows on influencing the Allies to win the Great War. They also believed the Jews were poisoning and polluting their society and their German values and were ruining their racial purity. They say that Putin is now in the running for the most evil Russian leader in history, only slightly lower than even Ivan the Terrible in second place, Igor the... Funny. But it's Stalin. Stalin's the worst, and it's not close. Yeah, also being anti-Zionist is not anti-Semitic, you nitwits. Wow, I never assumed that. They would assume Vivek Ramaswamy is Jewish as well, but he got the tan. Jeez. Yeah, maybe with legalizing homosexuality. Yeah, that's the thing. The Weimar Republic was run by Jews who wanted to castrate children. That's what I've heard before. It's nonsense. Do you think Baghdad and the Alexandria Library has many hidden history? Maybe some, but not too much. The problem is that mainstream media controls the free speech. Not here. I hate the mainstream media. Like whatever you want. Wanted to ask if someone could possibly help me out. Okay. I work full-time. It costs me $55 with insurance. My Venmo is... Okay, sure. Yes, of course. I'd be more than willing to help you. Here's my social security number so you can steal my identity. 111111111. There. Let's see. Read my other comments. The only ones talking about Jews is you guys. Anti-Zionist is not anti-Semitic. But all anti-Semites seem to be pretty anti-Zionistic. And all anti-Zionists seem to be pretty anti-Semitic. Yeah, they're the same thing. They're often the same thing in my experience. Charlie was seeming to change his opinion. So what? Why kill him when there's so many others that you haven't killed that have a huge platform who are continually criticizing you? It doesn't make any sense. So let me see. I get paid by Israel. I don't get paid by anyone, except by you, maybe. Criticism of the government of Israel or with the Jewish community is saying, doing is not anti-Semitic. I don't like both of them, the Jews and the Muslims. I don't even like my neighbor, and he's from there. Fair point. Hello, Faraz. Because Charlie Kirk directly influenced the Christian American voting base more than Fuentes and Owens was, he's critical of Israel at the end. But he still supported them more than he did not support them. So he had a nuanced position because nuance doesn't exist for people on the internet. So yes. Now we're getting back to the history. Please tell us about Vlad Tepes. Well, that's the Vlad the Impaler he's a Transylvanian prince who tries to free Wallachia and Hungary from the Ottomans. He fights against the Ottomans, then he fights against the Hungarians and their influence. He's an interesting guy, and of course uses brutality and really, really brutal war tactics, including impaling people on stakes, known for his bloodlust, to basically intimidate the Ottomans, who are the much greater power. Is Stalin still on display in Moscow? Would you ever go visit? Yes and yes. I believe so. The only reason why Israel is given as much grace as it is now due to religious Judeo-Christian ties. Not really, but okay. Are you pro-Israel or pro-human beings? Are you saying Israelis, meaning Jews, are not humans? I'm pro-truth and I'm pro-human. I'm like, no, you can be an anti-Zionist and not be an anti-Semite, but in my experience, they tend to be one and the same. Let me see. Charlie Kirk was a paid Zionist propaganda who realized he was wrong and paid dearly for it. Yes, clearly. Nobody in the comments seemingly can define Zionism. Nobody is able to define anything with history because this isn't a historical view, it's a prejudiced one. Prejudice often ignores history. If Jews are Semitic, why most of them look European? Because they are Semitic. A lot of Jews, the largest population of Jews, are Ashkenazi Jews, who most of them come from Europe. The nuance is what Israel can't risk. It allows security for what Israel is. No, I'm the one with nuance. And they tolerate me. They haven't killed me yet, so yeah. Can you tell us about the time where men accused women about being witches? Well, that's all throughout the early modern period. The Salem witch trials is just an extension of carried over European thoughts by both Catholics and Protestants from the late medieval and early modern period, where burning of witches at the stakes to prevent their heresy from spreading was actually common view. It's called sacralism, and it was quite it was heavily embraced by all churches during the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries. Yes, I do know that he was a prisoner of them for a while. Also, anyone who believes in two-state solution is sympathetic towards the Iranian regime. Ooh, interesting. Your thoughts on Muslims, Islamic takeover. Oh, okay, now we just got this part going on. I don't have any prejudice or hatred towards Muslims. I have serious questions about the historical validity of some of Islam's claims, especially about early Islamic claims. You criticize rulers for deaths. Why do you think Lincoln was so great when he neither prevented nor quickly ended the Civil War? Because he freed millions of slaves and guaranteed the freedoms of millions of more people. And yes, war means people die. Lincoln is not... There's a difference between killing people because they're in your way and killing people as part of a war. We don't need to define what we clearly see. What? Can you tell us about the times I already did? Anti-Islam warrior? My birthday isn't today and I'm not an anti-Islam warrior. He says if you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Semitic. He's one of those who uses the past to justify the crimes of the modern-day Israel. I said, in my experience, a lot of people who are supposedly anti-Zionist also tend to be anti-Semitic. It's hard. It's a hard balancing act. But you can be an anti-Zionist. You can be against what Israel is doing in Gaza and not be an anti-Semite. People who criticize Israel are not anti-Semites. What was the last English monarch to be killed in battle? Killed in battle? I don't know. It's been a while. Is it Harold II? Do we have to go all the way back to him? I think it is Harold II. Before the Norman conquest. Let me see. What's the difference between Sephardic and Ashkenazi? Sephardic Jews are from Spain. Let me see. You're not targeted because you don't have millions of American Christians being influenced by your nuance. One day I will. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. True. Do you love Israel? I love people. I love countries. I'm not, this is my job in this channel is to talk about history. And if it's the history of Israel or the history of the Middle East, I'll talk about it. A Semite are people that lived in the Semitic region, which includes Arabs. Yes, Arabs are Semites. I know that. Let me see. I don't know how to feel about a history stream turning religious. I get it. It's pretty hand in hand, but much of this is just what's going on now. True. I mean, I will talk about these things usually for a super chat. So let's go back to that and let's talk about history. I'm going to catch up to the chat and then wrap it up because I've been going 35 minutes longer than I needed to. But I just enjoy you guys so much. We know who shot him, though. We have his name and everything. Charlie Kirk was shot by a member of a trans LGBTQ mafia. They are stretching the Jewish thing, but what is the dancing Jew thing all about? I have no idea. Can one hate Trump and love freedom at the same time? Yeah. During 9/11. Muslim Palestinians danced in the streets when 9/11 happened, and some Jews did. I don't know. Maybe they felt that it was the time for the U.S. to get involved. I don't know why individual people do it, but I find it funny that people will point out Jews who danced in the streets, but not mention the Palestinians who did the same thing, or the Muslim world that heavily celebrated it, or the fact that Mein Kampf is the most popular book in much of the Middle East. Nobody talks about that, but they will talk about USS Liberty. They will talk about the Lavon affair, which are historical events, which are important, and I'll talk about them too. But the problem with the anti-Zionist and the anti-Semitic lobby, and they are two different lobbies. I just said that they're different. Don't do this whole I think they're the same thing. They're not. But the problem with these lobbies is that they immediately assume that everybody is trying to hide information about the Jews and is trying to lie to protect the Jews. They start with a bad faith argument. They start by poisoning the well, and then you can't actually discuss anything with them. I am pretty sure the Scots killed an English monarch. Okay, no. No, they did not. Edward II was killed by his wife. That's one of the kings who fought the Scottish. I don't think the Scottish killed an English king. But Lincoln didn't fight to free the slaves. Yes, he did. So, yes. But you also have to understand there's a difference between fighting a war to do something and having soldiers die in that war. That is not the same thing. Is FDR responsible for the 400,000 Americans who died fighting the Japanese and Germans? So you have no problems with Talmudic Judaism. Have you seen the ages for consent in these books? This is a Wendy's. This is a history channel. Yeah, the Talmud has bad things in it. So does the Bible. So does the Quran. So does almost every holy book. It has pretty controversial things in it. I mean, the Virgin Mary was 13. Muhammad married a 6-year-old. We know all of this stuff. The age of and I have actually read the age of consent argument in the Talmud. If it's actually interesting to you, because it's Jewish history, I guess, or religious history. If you're actually interested in the real truth, it's not as simple as Rebecca was 3 years old when she married Jacob. It doesn't match any of the narrative from the Old Testament, and not all rabbis believe that. It's a controversial take, to say the least. Kind of on the fringe, even among people who wrote the Talmud and who interpret the Talmud. Richard III was killed by, well, you could say he was killed by in battle. Yeah, that would be the one. Richard III was killed by Henry VII, but that's a civil war. The English have had so many civil wars. Richard III was the last English monarch to perish in battle. Battles were field, yep. I'm glad we found you, UN. Richard III was the last English monarch. True. Bosworth, thank you for mentioning that. See, I got fact checked. There you go. Go eat your kosher sausage. As someone who was engaged to a Jew, I can tell you right now that Jews don't think that about anyone, about Goyim. But nevertheless, who cares? There shouldn't be a one-state or two-state solution. There should be no state solution, especially if it's Jewish. What? How you could be critical of old Islamic history and not Moses and all old prophets? I never said I wasn't critical of them. Who said I wasn't critical of them? I'm saying that you have a prophet who lived 600 years supposedly after Jesus of Nazareth, and there's probably better evidence from anti-Christian sources of Jesus actually existing than non-Muslim sources of Muhammad existing. There are bits and pieces about certain Arabic generals and warlords, and John of Damascus is a good example of this, a Christian source writing, But there is no evidence that Muhammad lived in Mecca. There is no evidence that Mecca existed in the 7th century. And there is no evidence that the Quran was written in the 7th century. I'm sorry, there just isn't. Now, is it possible that Muhammad lived, and he lived in Yathrib, and he wrote the Quran? Yes, completely possible. And of course, Muslims don't believe Muhammad wrote the Quran. He had this recitation given to him by the Archangel Gabriel. I'm very well aware of the difference of how Muslims do not see the Quran as written by Muhammad. But people who are not Muslims, who are not bound by that faith objective, don't see it that way. And by the way, I have no problem with the Islamic message. None. I have problem with the historicity of some of Islam's claims. Who knows? I might be a Muslim. I say salam to people all the time. I think there's a lot of beauty in Islam. But I'm not just going to ignore the history. And the same with the Old Testament prophets. There's no evidence, there's very little evidence of the Exodus. There is evidence of a Hebrew presence in Palestine, or the land of the Canaanites, around the time that could kind of match up with the ancients. But there's so little writing from that time period that so much of the history of that time period is total conjecture. So that it's easy to talk about Jesus in the time of the Pax Romana, but it's a lot harder to talk about Moses 1,500 years before that. You can't fully understand the Torah if you don't know the Talmud. Christians on line 3. Nobody fully understands the Torah. Look at Epstein. There's a reason Israel is, oh, for goodness sakes. Yes, Jeffrey Epstein was Jewish. Bad people have been Jews. Therefore, all Jews are bad. That's the basic argument. Speaking of poisoning the well, I think a lot has happened during the attacks by the Haganah. What is that? Let me see. The Israeli are the very intelligent financially and technologically. Okay. Let me see. Your thoughts on Jeffrey Epstein Island. I don't even want to talk about Jeffrey Epstein. Never current affairs topic. Give me a super chat if you want me to talk about it. FDR is not responsible. Is responsible in what way? Is he morally fail? Is it a moral failing because of the men that died? Or was their deaths for a good, noble purpose? You can't have... It's great to talk about, oh, what if we just didn't have any wars? But wars just going to happen. And the question is, who's going to win the wars? That's the real question of history. It's not that wars are going to happen. Can we stop wars? Can we not kill any civilians? No, it's not going to happen. Sorry. It's, will there be a moral, who is the moral side? Who is the most moral side? And will that side win? The Bible has no child taking, in the New Testament. In the New Testament. And the Virgin Mary was 13. I think that's a child. Not even in the Old Testament. Look at the story of Tamar. I've read enough of the Bible to know that that's not true. I'm sorry. And it's no criticism of the Bible, no criticism of Jews, no criticism of Christians. It's no criticism of Islam. I am saying that the moral standards by which we judge these religions are often inconsistent with each other because we have a bias and we're trying to prove something and we don't know history. We don't know the cultural and civilizational context of when these books were actually written. So, that's fair. I get it. You have a girl who's prepubescent versus a girl who's postpubescent. Would you like to return to paganism? I don't know. I'm not going to share my religious perspectives. No forms of women being taken advantage of in the Bible are child exploitation. You do have a guy sacrificing his own daughter. You do have Tamar. And, of course, you have the Virgin Mary. I'm sorry, but it happens all throughout the Bible. Because it's a story of human experiences. And unfortunately, a horrible part of human experiences are those things. Why did the Irish hate Cromwell? He really horribly oppressed them and brutally murdered them mercilessly, even women and children. But he did conquer the Irish. It's a pretty formidable feat considering no English king was able to do it before, and this Lord Protector was able to do it without a king. Let me see. Do you work for the Mossad? No. Typical Mecca denial. I'm sorry. Mecca exists now. Mecca in the Quran is put in several different locations. One of them is Petra. There's Yathrib, which is Medina. We have the Romans talking about that city. But we don't have Mecca. I just remember a question. Was there a Muslim general or king to something called Solomon that the Crusaders respected? Well, Saladin, the great Ayyubid general of the Third Crusade. What's your favorite race? I don't have a favorite race. I'm going to try to catch up to that. There are a few Muslim leaders that were respectful and brought positive. Yes, there were many great Muslim leaders who were respectful and tolerant. Suleiman the Magnificent. I mean, the Muslims just don't think that Jesus is divine. They don't think he died on the cross. They don't think Jesus is the Son of God. Yes, they also think that that Christians, they also conquered Christian lands and took Christians from them. I find it fascinating that people who criticize Jews all the time and say Jews hate Christians, typically they're these far-right Christian people, never talk about what the Muslims did to Christianity, to Christian lands. The Jews never did that, but they don't care about that. I never said that Epstein didn't work for Mossad. I don't know if he did or not. He might have. More like there are Christian and Jewish leaders bring positive change to Muslim leaders. I don't know what you're talking about. Islam was created by Arabs. Yes, that is true. Whoever created it. Why is France such a mixed bag of success and failures? The French have had more military victories than anyone else in human history. Let me see here. Jesus loves you. Okay. FDR was a socialist giver to freeloaders. That's how he felt morally. Yeah, I'm talking about a war, not political policy, and I don't think he was a socialist. I think he was interested in it, but not fully on board with it. Thoughts on ancient Chinese crab eater? I don't know what you mean by that. I don't know what that is. Mehmet II was responsible for the discovery of America. No. Operation. Yes, I've heard of cast thy bread during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. The Haganah used typhoid bacteria to contaminate water and wells in Arab villages. In Palestinian villages, yes. How many people died because of cast thy bread? People bring up cast thy bread. How many people died? The Great New Deal did more damage than not. Yeah, it's not the big success people think it is. The gold standard was bad too. Let me see. Is the attempt to smear Trump. They don't care about the truth, just to smear. I mean, I'm tired of hearing about Epstein and Trump. I'm tired of all of this. I just like to talk about history. You're misreading the Bible. Well, I'm not a biblical scholar, so. You are a Jew. It's obvious. I'm not Jewish. I've said many times I'm not Jewish. Muslims reverse Jesus as a prophet and a Messiah. Revere Jesus, but they challenge the deaf and that he is God directly. Yes. Let me see. What am I supposed to read about the Talmud? Other than that he is a highly respected person, okay. Please like, yes, Froggy is correct. Then they don't respect him as a prophet if they don't believe he is God. That's not true. I mean, we had crusades, so we did do something. We pushed them out of Spain and Eastern Europe. Reconquista, you know who El Cid is. It's called Reconquista, and yes, I know who El Cid is. Yes, the Christians took back lands the Muslims had done to them. That's what the Crusades are about. I've talked about this many times. Go watch my video on the Crusades. Let me see. I don't know what your comment is. I'm not censoring anyone's ideas. I have so many comments. I'm just trying to catch up to the chat so I can end the darn live stream. Let me see. Name all the kings then. Oh, you know history? Name all the kings then. Louis, John, Otto, and Ivan. There. Yeah, we got Russia, Germany, England, and France taken care of. Jews and Muslims are the same in the sense that they reject Jesus in the way the Muslims have conquered the white man's land. So, the white man's land? Are you seriously just a racist? So, put on the yarmulke. Sure. I can hear the birds. Sounds peaceful. Yes, it is peaceful. Yeah, I am. Yeah. Yes, so much for friendly history. The Reconquista was like the Holocaust of the ancient time. It was a medieval reconquering of land that had already been conquered. The Jews had not conquered Germany, so the Holocaust is not a parallel at all. So yeah. How important was the Battle of Vienna? Extremely important. The Polish bail out the Austrians from the Ottoman advances. King Jan Sobieski remains a hero to the Polish people. It's really when Poland is at its military and political apex. I am saying Muslims invaded Persia and they destroyed it, and until today they are killing children. It's not the same Muslims, obviously, but yes, Persia is the home of Zoroastrianism and was not a Muslim country by trade, and they are not Arabs. How do we know what we know about history? Just because it's in a book doesn't make it right. That's true, like the Quran. Why was the UK so dirty that it became known as the Great Stink? Cholera, refuse on the streets. This is why we have the cholera outbreaks. Refuse being very, very common all around the city. And you mix that with the Industrial Revolution and coal and all of that, and you've basically got a very polluted, nasty place. How long does it take you to relax after live stream? A couple hours. Depends on how long the live stream is. Have you read the Gnostic books? And if so, what are your thoughts? The Nam Hammadi? I've read some of them. It's interesting. It's interesting the way it's a kind of a deviation from Christianity. It's obviously far removed from, I mean, people who talk about the Nam Hammadi and talk about the Gospel of Thomas and stuff like this, these books are written much, much longer after Jesus' life. These people are unlikely to believe the Gospels are historically reliant, but put the Gospels as the same historical weight as the Nam Hammadi, when the Gospels are much more closer to being primary direct sources and could actually include the accounts of people who lived during Jesus' life. It's not the same for the Nam Hammadi. You said that you are sick of Trump. My question is why? Do you hate freedom? I don't hate, it's not a dislike of Trump, it's a dislike of people talking about him on this channel. Let me see. I don't know if they have anything to do with Nancy Guthrie. The evidence is all there. If you don't call out who Epstein worked for, your opinions are invalid. You know what? I think your opinions are getting invalid, and I think you need to calm down. You're being too loud. So there you go. All right. Yeah. I don't hate anyone or anything. I am going to sign off, though, except Hitler. Hitler is bad. I'm going to sign off. Thank you so much. Got caught up. Almost went 2 hours with you guys, so thanks so much for that. Please like and subscribe on your way out. Join us tomorrow for my live stream lecture before this big game for Andrew Jackson. And you can vote on the channel about who you think is going to win the big game, Seahawks or Patriots. We'll see about that. Yeah, I hate Mao too. Okay, thank you. I'll accept that in how it's given, Cornelius. Hopefully Jesus can forgive all the anti-Semitism because Jesus is a Jew. But anyways, Pol Pot was not based. He was based in murder and genocide. So yeah. And a great stream as usual. Thank you, Joshua. Great to have you here. Thank my moderators and all their hard work. I'll see you next time. Take care. And as always, remember,